And now I'm going to share my screen. Always takes me a minute to get to the right thing. Okay, so I hope that you can see my screen at this point.
Yeah, we can see it. We can see both that and you.
But you know, what you're not seeing is me in the little corner thing. That's still on Scott's computer, and I don't know why that is, but I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to close that down entirely. So anyway, let me go back. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Currently, I'm the president of Patuxent Bird Club, which is based in Prince George's County. I've been with MOS since the 1990s. I originally was with the Cecil Bird Club. I got involved with the sanctuaries actually through making this presentation. Back in the Cecil Bird Club, one of the members at one time was Paul Bystrack, who has been a sanctuary volunteer since he was a teenager back in, I'm going to say, the 1960s. He has been involved with the sanctuaries for a long, long time. And because he was a member of my local club, I got to know a little bit about the sanctuaries. So, but not a whole lot. I wasn't a volunteer with the sanctuaries myself. But back in, I think it was January of 2017, the MOS board held a retreat for long range planning. And during the discussion that day, it became very apparent that even MOS board members didn't know very much about the MOS sanctuaries. So the idea was to get somebody to do a presentation about the sanctuaries, and that presentation could go from chapter to chapter so that the members of MOS could learn about the resource that we have in the MOS sanctuaries. I used to teach. I used to teach at the University of Delaware and later at what used to be called UMUC, University of Maryland University College. And honestly, giving a presentation, I can do that in my sleep. So I volunteered to make this presentation on the sanctuaries. And, I got so interested in the sanctuaries that I joined the Sanctuary Committee. So I've been a member of the Sanctuary Committee since 2017. And it has really been a delight to get involved with the sanctuaries, to use that as a way to learn more about more chapters of MOS and to meet people from throughout the state. So thank you very much for inviting me to speak tonight. It really is a pleasure to be with you, either in person or in spirit, as the case may be. So it's called Rediscovering the MOS Sanctuaries because honestly, some of them were forgotten and somewhat neglected for a number of years. MOS has 10 sanctuaries at the current time. They protect almost 3,000 acres across the state. We're going to visit them one by one, so I won't read all the names now, but notice that the sanctuaries are located in several different counties throughout the state: Garrett, Frederick, Prince George's, Anne Arundel, 2 in Talbot, Caroline, and Somerset. And they vary in size from 8 acres, the smallest, up to over 2,000 acres for Irish Grove. So there's a lot of variety out there. This map shows where the sanctuaries are located, and they literally are spread across the state. 3 in Garrett County, 1 in Frederick County, 1 in Anne Arundel, 1 in Prince George's, 3 in the mid part of the eastern shore, and 1 way down south at the bottom of the eastern shore. So we'll be visiting these one by one, pretty much from west to east, but with a couple of detours to talk about sanctuary history. And I'd like to start by talking about how the sanctuary program got started. Those of you who have been with MOS for a while might remember that MOS was founded in 1945 as an offshoot of the Natural History Society of Maryland. And it's kind of an interesting thing, even though MOS was founded in 1945, they never bothered to become incorporated until 1955. And that's a side story that I'll tell you in a minute. The sanctuary program got started in 1955 when Mr. John Besson donated $500 to start the MOS Sanctuary Fund. He knew that MOS members had been talking quite a bit for those 10 years, from 1945 until 1955, about acquiring sanctuaries that would preserve habitat for birds, and they would be places where MOS members could go on field trips and bird walks and do a little bit of scientific research. So a funny thing about Mr. Besson is that he was not a member of MOS ever, but he and his twin sister Adele owned property on the water in Anne Arundel County, and they had quite a few friends who were members of MOS, and they used to entertain their MOS friends at their property quite a bit. So they became rather fond of MOS, and when Mr. Besson's sister Adele died, he decided to give a check to MOS in Adele's memory. And this is where the incorporation comes in. He had been thinking about making this donation for some time, but he was hesitant because he knew that MOS wasn't incorporated, and he didn't want to give his money to what was simply at the time a social club. So MOS got word of that through the grapevine, and the officers at the time ran right out and got incorporated so that they could accept the donation from Mr. Besson. And the donation was in honor of Adele, who had recently passed away. This photo is taken from an old Maryland Birdlife that shows the presentation of the donation check to Dick Clean, who was the president of MOS at the time. Sadly, Mr. Besson himself is not shown in the photograph because he was very ill. He was in the hospital at the time of the presentation of the check, and in fact, he passed away just a month later. So he wasn't there to really see the sanctuary program take off and get started. However, his donation, that little $500, which at the time in 1955, that was a considerable amount of money, his donation gave a kickstart to the MOS Sanctuary Program, and literally, MOS chapter members went right out and started looking for land. Even though there was quite a bit of enthusiasm about looking for land, when I read back through the annals of the society, mostly in the form of Maryland Birdlife articles, I found that there wasn't a whole lot written about why MOS wanted sanctuaries. Everybody agreed that that was a good thing, but nobody wrote it down until 1960. And this was shortly after the first MOS sanctuary was acquired. Chan Robbins at the time, and I'll say a little bit more about Chan in a few minutes. Chan Robbins at the time was the editor of Maryland Birdlife. He served as the editor from about 1947 or so until 2015. He was the long-serving editor of Maryland Birdlife. And in 1960, he wrote an editorial about why MOS should have sanctuaries. I don't usually like to put a whole lot of words on slides, but Chan's words are so important in setting the direction for the MOS Sanctuary Program that I want to take the time to read a quote from his editorial. Chan wrote, "We have a fine, secluded tract on which to relax and enjoy the world about us, a tract to which we can retreat from the noise and smells of the city. We have unpolluted streams in which we can study animals that once were more widely distributed through our state. We can conduct group projects and carry on individual studies on a great variety of birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, or insects. We can have family outings and club field trips." So there's two things I want to point out from this quote. One is that Chan envisioned the sanctuaries as active places where people would go, either in groups or individually, to really use the sanctuaries and study what was there, either for their own enjoyment or for scientific purposes. And the other thing Chan said right at the very beginning was, it's not just about birds. It's really about biodiversity, to use a word that wasn't really employed at the time. But he specifically said mammals, reptiles, amphibians, or insects, not just birds. Chan went on to say, "But more than this, we have an opportunity at very modest cost to the society to provide educational facilities, not only for our own membership, but also for the Maryland public. The hobby from which we derive so much enjoyment can be converted into a tool for sowing the seeds of conservation, so that more of Maryland's citizens will learn to appreciate the natural areas of our state, and in turn, help to preserve more of these areas for the enjoyment of future generations. This is our great challenge. So here are the 3 points that Chan spoke about in his editorial: preservation and protection of land as habitat for birds and other wildlife, education and research so that the public can become better informed, and recreation. People should enjoy these places. Our first sanctuary, acquired in 1960, shortly before Chan wrote that editorial, was Rock Run, and ironically, it no longer functions as an MOS sanctuary. It had a lifespan of 16 years from 1960 until 1976. It was located in what was now Susquehanna State Park in Harford County, and this is a photo of a historic home that was on the property. MOS had 57 acres that included this house. This house, by the way, is on the Maryland Inventory of Historic Places. It dates back to colonial times. MOS did not own this sanctuary. It was leased from a private landowner. The state park had not yet been established. It was leased from Mr. J. Gilman Paul for $10 a month. $120 a year was all that MOS was paying for this. And this map is the current map, trail map for Susquehanna State Park, that shows the location of the sanctuary with this black outline, sort of shaped like a grand piano. And you can see it's very near the Susquehanna River and embedded right in the current trail system of Susquehanna State Park. So if you go there these days, you can walk right through what used to be the MOS Sanctuary. The ruins of the house are still there. I'll talk about the house in a minute. Rock Run was a busy place from the very first. The Harford chapter, the Harford Bird Club, used it for their meetings and for picnics now and then. All of the MOS chapters immediately scheduled field trips for their members. Outside groups also used it for field trips for their people, people like garden clubs, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, classroom trips, and so on. There was a bird banding program there. There was winter bird feeding that was carried out, and this is a historic photo from Maryland Birdlife at the time, shows one of the large bird feeders that was built. This bird feeder would hold 50 pounds of seed. They were not kidding about their desire to feed birds. And it's interesting, all of the early sanctuaries had such large feeders. The members at the time thought it was very important to feed birds through the winter. Nowadays, we know that feeding birds is really done for our own enjoyment rather than for the birds. Scientific studies have shown that the birds don't really depend on our food for survival. But at the time, we didn't know that. So it was thought that these bird feeders were essential to survival of the birds. There was a trail system built and marked on the property. Some of those trails are still existing in Susquehanna State Park. And a study grid was laid out for scientific studies. Chan Robbins employed his 4 children, to lay out that study grid. And so now I just want to pause and make sure everybody recognizes the name of Chan Robbins. Chan Robbins is arguably the most famous of MOS members. He was a world-famous, internationally known, and esteemed ornithologist. Assuming that most of you are familiar with his name, Chan was a biologist, a professional ornithologist employed at the Patuxent Wildlife Research Center, and he spent his whole career there. Chan passed away in 2017, but he left behind a very long legacy of scientific endeavors. He was the person who developed the protocol for the North American Breeding Bird Survey. He also developed the protocol and the concept of the statewide breeding bird atlas. He helped organize the first statewide atlas, and the atlas concept has now spread to other states in the United States as well as to other countries. In addition, Chan is known for his scientific studies for bird banding. The scientific studies include such things as the importance of forest fragmentation, or the deleterious effects of forest fragmentation on bird survival for forest breeding birds. He also worked on some of the DDT studies that led to Rachel Carson writing Silent Spring. Numerous other scientific studies, really too many to mention. But I did mention that he was known for his bird banding. In the popular view, Chan is probably best known as the person who banded Wisdom the albatross. Wisdom is widely considered to be the oldest living wild bird. Chan banded her in 1954 when she was already an adult. She is still alive and reproducing on Midway Atoll. So, as I say, Chan is widely known as the person who banded Wisdom. And a side note, at Patuxent Research Refuge, where Chan worked, there's a group that's working on a project in honor of Chan. There will be an education pavilion named after Chan. It's an outdoor education pavilion, and a trail leading up to that pavilion is being called the Wisdom Trail. So that's in memory of our dear Chan Robbins. Chan was really instrumental in many, many ways in kicking off the Maryland Ornithological Society's Sanctuary Program. In fact, he contributed a lot of cash to the program. When something was needed, Chan never hesitated to dig into his own pocket. Oh, and there were nature education camps also at Rock Run. It was a very busy place. So why don't we have it anymore? Well, there were a number of problems at Rock Run. At the time that Rock Run existed as a sanctuary, this part of Harford County was still considered very remote and isolated. The roads leading into that area were gravel roads. It was difficult to get to, very, very isolated. And the isolation led to vandalism opportunities. So there was repeated vandalism to the house. And then the landlord, Mr. Paul, passed away in 1973. And after his death, the state of Maryland purchased his land to become part of Susquehanna State Park. Even after the state park was established, MOS continued to lease 1 acre and the house from the state, and this continued until early in 1976. At that time, vandals got into the house again, and this time they set a fire that almost totally destroyed the house. So after that circumstance, MOS decided to walk away, and they relinquished the lease to the state. So the ruins of the house are still there. I don't believe it's habitable anymore. However, other MOS sanctuaries came and went. There were 3 that came and went over the years, including this one that's pictured here called Tumsuden. It was named after Carolyn Tumsuden, who was a physiologist who worked at Aberdeen Proving Ground. And Dr. Tumsuden left this property to MOS as a bequest in her will. It came a month after MOS relinquished the lease on the Rock Run Sanctuary. So this sanctuary was also located in Harford County, and it stepped in as a replacement to Rock Run. It was located adjacent to the Harford Glen Nature Education Center, which is used by the school board in Harford County as a nature education center for teachers and for students. Students from elementary schools visit there. So just like Rock Run, this soon became a very active place. It was used by Harford Glen as well as by MOS itself. However, there were vandalism problems, just like at Rock Run. So again, MOS relinquished this sanctuary and turned it over to Harford Glen in 1994. Another sanctuary that came and went was Adventure, located in Montgomery County. This consisted of 14 acres, including a house, which you can see on the hillside in the photo here. The house was originally the private home of Alice Hostetler, who left this land to become a nature park. Alice loved nature, and she was very intent that she wanted her land to become a place where people could visit and learn all about nature and enjoy it. So she left her land to be managed by a 3-way trust that consisted of MOS, Hood College, and Montgomery County Parks. And from 1969 through 2008, this was a very active place as an MOS sanctuary. Notably, MOS had a banding program here, a bird banding program that was run by Margaret Donald, who was a friend of Alice Hostetler. That banding program was prolific, not only in banding birds, but also in welcoming visitors. They had over 1,000 elementary school children visiting every year while the banding station was in operation. So this was fulfilling the dream that Alice Hostetler had of her place acting as a place where the people could learn about nature. However, Margaret Donald, who was doing the bird banding, passed away. Chan Robbins, who was one of the MOS trustees for this land, also passed away. And at that point, MOS backed away from management of Adventure. It's now managed solely by the Montgomery County Parks Department, but it is still there. It can be visited as a nature park. And then a third sanctuary that came and went was Hancock's Resolution in Anne Arundel County. This was 12 acres that was leased on a trial basis from Historic Annapolis Incorporated. Hancock's Resolution is a farm that dates back to colonial times. And at the time of the MOS lease, it was literally, the buildings were literally falling down. There's a historic home there and a number of farm buildings. And as part of the lease agreement, MOS was supposed to restore these. But MOS quickly realized that this was more than MOS had the resources to take on, particularly because, just like the other places, Hancock's Resolution was subject to repeated vandalism. So it was sort of a 3 steps forward and no, it was 1 step forward and 3 steps back in terms of getting Hancock's Resolution into good shape. So MOS relinquished the lease on this. It's now operated by Anne Arundel County as a historic site that's open to the public, and it has been partially restored. So this can be visited if one chooses to see it. So that brings us to talk about the first sanctuary that MOS ever owned. This was Carey Run Sanctuary. It was purchased by MOS in 1962. This is the cover photo from Maryland Birdlife at the end of that year in December, and it shows a historic home that exists at Carey Run. Carey Run was purchased after many years of searching by MOS members throughout the state. Remember that Mr. Besson gave that $500 in 1955, and it wasn't until 1962 that anyone found land that was suitable to become an MOS sanctuary. And here it was, Carey Run. The house is still there. This is what it looked like in the summer of 2021, just after it got a brand new, spiffy green metal roof that really improves the look of it and also the soundness because the old roof was leaking quite a bit. This photo was taken by Melissa Hensel, who's a Garrett Allegheny Bird Club member, and she's the caretaker for the sanctuary house. Just going back to the old photo for a minute, notice the difference in the trees. The trees have really grown up around the house and, in fact, all over the sanctuary. I'll show you some more photos in a minute. First, I want to show you where Carey Run is located. This is Garrett County in the far northwestern corner of Maryland. And Carey Run is located in the northeast corner of that county, very close to the Allegheny state line, which is here, Allegheny County state line. Pennsylvania is just a short distance to the north. So, Carey Run. As I mentioned, it was located in Garrett County. At the time it was identified by MOS members for purchase, it was an abandoned farm consisting of 52 acres with that house that you saw, as well as a number of outbuildings. Those outbuildings have now been removed. They were not in any shape that MOS could use them. The initial purchase there was in 1962. MOS paid $4,000 in cash. And it's quite an amazing thing to read the history of this. The scouting party that identified Carey Run as a potential sanctuary for MOS found it in August of 1962. By November, MOS had raised the $4,000, and again, that was a lot of money back in 1962, but they had raised the $4,000 and closed the deal on the land, and then as you saw, the sanctuary was featured on the cover of Maryland Birdlife in December of 1962. So all of that happened between August and December. Really, they moved fast once they found a sanctuary. And then additional land was purchased by MOS in 1973. 110 acres adjacent to the original purchase became available. The purchase price on that land was 10 times more. It was $40,000. This time, MOS took out a mortgage on half the amount and paid cash for the other half. However, MOS again embarked on a very enthusiastic fundraising campaign, and they managed to retire the mortgage in just 3 years. Every MOS chapter provided a donation to that fund, as well as many individual MOS members. And I'll tell you, when you read the old accounts of this, it was clear that there was a great deal of excitement about this sanctuary from outside organizations as well, particularly in Garrett and Allegheny counties. So local groups such as Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, garden clubs, and school classes also contributed to the purchase price. I'm told that in elementary school classrooms, there were little boxes where spare pennies and nickels and dimes were collected that went into the sanctuary fund to pay off Carey Run. So I told you I'd show you a few more then and now photos. This is what the entrance road looked like in 1962, and here's what it looks like now. You can see again the trees have grown up. Here's the fence line that existed at the time. It's still there. This is the entrance to Carey Run. I'll have to be sipping on water from time to time, excuse me. Here's another pair of views of some hillsides, a field and a hillside. The field in the front view is still maintained as a field at Carey Run, but the field in the back view has grown up into forest. So I wanted to say a few words about the Carey Run history. The history starts way back in colonial times, before the Revolutionary War. The southern boundary of the property sits on what is called the Old Braddock Road. This is an old frontier road that was used by General Braddock during the French and Indian War to move his troops westward into Ohio and West Virginia. The house at Carey Run, excuse me, I think I'm also going to have to resort to a cough drop because my voice tends to go when I talk a lot. The house was built in 1887 from white pine that was grown on the property. Carey Run was a working farm in its day through the years. The farmers grew potatoes, oats, corn, and strawberries, and there was also an orchard. Some of the trees from the orchard still exist. Eventually, the farmers abandoned the property because of the cold, snowy winters. Life was just too hard out there. The photos here on this page show a nature trail that we have laid out on the Old Braddock Road. This was an Eagle Scout project, and the nature trail, the signs along the nature trail combined the history of the Old Braddock Road with natural history of the area and Native American lore. So it's a very unique nature trail. Carey Run sits at an elevation of 2,500 feet. Carey Run itself is a stream that's a tributary of the Savage River. You cross the Savage River on a little wooden bridge just before entering the driveway at Carey Run. And then Hefner Run and a few other small streams also come through the sanctuary. There's a freshwater pond that was created by MOS by damming Carey Run. Oops, sorry, didn't mean to do that. There are also old fields. This is the pond, sorry. Here's one of the fields. The fields are mown annually to maintain habitat for sparrows and other grass scrub breeders. There are a number of woodland types on the property, including hemlock woods, white pine, and Douglas fir. These are some of the hemlocks here. There's also deciduous woods that you can see in this fall photo. The deciduous tree types include wild cherry maple and oak. And there's a small lawn area that's kept mowed near the house. Once Carey Run was established, it became, just like Rock Run, it became a very busy place very quickly. The Allegheny Bird Club held an annual picnic there. There was winter bird feeding. As I mentioned, this was thought to be very important in those days. Here's someone who has gone out there in the snow to keep the bird feeder full. These are old photos from Maryland Birdlife. There were Girl Scout and Boy Scout camps that were held there every year, and the Girl Scouts laid out the trail system at Carey Run that we still use today, and the Boy Scouts helped to build the trail markers. University ornithology classes were taken there, both from Frostburg State University as well as from the local community colleges. There were elementary school classes and adult birding weekends. And here are some MOS members enjoying a picnic on the lawn by the house. Nowadays, Carey Run is still a very active place. MOS members can enjoy overnight stays at the house, or they can camp on the grounds. The house is closed during the winter, but it's available from about April through November. We turn the water off during the winter because it's such a cold environment there. There's an annual spring work day to get the place ready for the next season. There are nest boxes for bluebirds and other cavity nesters throughout the property. Research projects are conducted there. There's habitat enhancement. What's going on here is a tree planting that took place fall a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. I've lost track of time. This is the sanctuary manager, Chuck Hager, who's leading this team of Frostburg University students who came to help us plant some trees at Carey Run. There's also a junior nature camp that this guy, Chuck Hager, runs every year. It's a residential week-long camp for youngsters. And Chuck is a dentist by profession, but he's been running this environmental education camp for years for youngsters to come to Carey Run and stay for a week. And we have had one blitz that we ran. It was meant to be a bug blitz with the Maryland Entomological Society, but we had so many good basic naturalists. Here's a photo of some of us gathered at that what became a full-blown bio blitz at Carey Run. This was in the summer of 2019. We've published the results of the species that were found during that blitz in both Maryland Birdlife and the Maryland Entomological Society journal. And this is a photo of Sue Muller from Howard County doing night lighting for nocturnal insects at that blitz. So very active. Lots of stuff is going on at Carey Run. This shows the full extent of Carey Run today. B and C sections are the 110 acres that were purchased at a later date. The land parcels out there in Garrett County are mostly laid out in these blocks, which are about 50 acres each. That's why this looks like a checkerboard. The original section was A, shown in this original trail map here. This was what the sanctuary consisted of when it was first purchased. And we do have trails throughout the 152 acres of the sanctuary. The breeding birds of Carey Run, for those of us who live, Carroll County is a little more west of where I live, Prince George's County, but it's still a different habitat, so they get some birds that we don't get here more in the eastern part of Maryland. I won't read the entire list, but really some very nice birds breed at Carey Run. And here's a photo of a nest of great horned owls that's quite close to the house. We have a current threat, however, at Carey Run. We have about 40 acres of hemlock trees. They're not in any one place. There are several different little woodlots that have the hemlocks in them. The hemlock habitat is really a very special place. It's a good breeding ground for thrushes and for warblers like black-throated green. However, the hemlocks in our land, like in other lands throughout the Northeast, are infested with an exotic insect called hemlock woolly adelgid that was introduced from Asia. This insect, you can see the little white dots here in this photo. This insect sucks the juices from the hemlock twigs and eventually kills the trees. These hemlocks, this is a photo at Carey Run, these hemlocks are infested, and you can see that they've lost a lot of their lower branches. They get this candlestick appearance as they're starting to die, and some of them are dying off already. So we became aware of this infestation last year. We estimate that 90 to 100% of our trees are infested, and we've consulted with Dr. Mike Ropp at the University of Maryland. He's an entomologist there, widely known as the bug guy. We've consulted with him to start developing a plan for controlling these insects, and we'll be working on that over the next year or so to get that going. So just to leave you with some idea of how beautiful Carey Run is, just a few final scenes that I will not narrate, except to say this is our state insect, the Baltimore checker spot butterfly, and we do have a small colony there. We have the proper food sources, the nectar plants and the plants that their young rely on. So we do have a small colony of Baltimore checker spot. Baltimore checker spot, sadly, is now a declining insect in the state of Maryland. So I'm looking at my clock and I'm seeing that I have to either talk faster or skip some things. So I'm going to move along now to Caroline Wilson, another sanctuary in Garrett County. This one is south of Deep Creek Lake, shown here. Caroline Wilson Sanctuary consists of 86 acres that were acquired by MOS in 1988. This was a gift from the Nature Conservancy, who in turn had acquired it from the family of Caroline Wilson following her death. The Wilson family is a local family that dates back to Revolutionary War times in Garrett County. They were one of the families that were the earliest settlers in Garrett County, which, back in the 1700s, Garrett County was considered frontier land. So the Wilson family has been there a long time. The nearest little village to this sanctuary is called Wilson. And Caroline Wilson was one of the owners of this property at one time. She was quite a nature lover. And following her death, her family decided to give it to the Nature Conservancy, which passed it on to us. The sanctuary consists of the wooded stream valley that protects the Little Youghiogheny River. And here in some photos on the right, you can see it's entirely wooded. The sanctuary is surrounded by farms and a few residential lots, as you can see in this satellite photo. The sanctuary is here. It's kind of a wedge-shaped thing with a notch out of the top. The Little Youghiogheny River flows right down through the middle of it, and there's a freshwater bog down toward the south end that's formed around this the Little Yough. This is a private farm that's adjacent. One of the odd things about this sanctuary is that it is landlocked. It has no frontage on any road, no road whatsoever. So this double line that you can see that forms the boundary of the sanctuary, that's not a road. Those are railroad tracks. It's a freight line. And so how we get into the sanctuary is we come down a public road here, we park along the railroad tracks in this area, and then we walk down the tracks to get to the sanctuary. Once you get there, it's just a short little scramble down the embankment of the railroad where you can reach an old road that runs through the sanctuary. And there are a couple little side trails that branch off from there. So it's a nice walk once you get there. And this is what it looks like. Here's the railroad track that we walk down. The sanctuary is on the left in this curve. We're looking down into the sanctuary here from the railroad embankment, and you can see that there is a nice trail once you get down there. This is the Little Yough. It's really just a stream. It's called a river, but it's really a stream. So the breeding birds in this area are also very interesting, emblematic of Western Maryland. They include ruffed grouse and broad-winged hawk. This is a photo of a ruffed grouse taken near the sanctuary, not at the sanctuary. A word about these breeding bird slides that I'll be showing for each sanctuary. The lists are taken from the Breeding Bird Atlas, which, as you know, is block-based. So the birds shown on the list come from the Atlas block in which the sanctuary is located. Most of them, however, have been found on each particular sanctuary. So this is what it looks like, just some more pictures of how pretty Caroline Wilson Sanctuary is. It's an isolated area, very quiet, very pristine streams flow through here. In fact, the immediate neighbor to the southwest, I should have said this when I was showing you the satellite image of the map, the neighbor to the southwest is a chunk of land that's owned by Deer Park Water, and that's where your water comes from when you buy Deer Park brand water in bottles. So our sanctuary is quite nice. Our newest sanctuary is also located in Garrett County. It's the Chandler and Eleanor Robbins Sanctuary at Red Run that consists of 45 acres. This sanctuary was originally purchased by Chan and Eleanor, and they purchased it not to build a house on. They found this land when Chan was out doing some bird science work in Western Maryland. And they stumbled upon this land and thought it was so valuable for its habitat that they wanted to preserve it. So they bought it. It's wooded with a mix of deciduous trees and conifers, including hemlocks. These two are infested with hemlock woolly adelgids, so we have work to do here as well. And when Chan passed away, Eleanor passed away, I think it was 2008 or 9, and then Chan followed her in 2017. The land passed to his children at that time. He had 4 children, and the children got together and decided the only thing they wanted to do with this land was to give it to MOS. So they passed it on to MOS, and MOS acquired it in fall of 2017. It's located very near Carey Run. It's located up near the Pennsylvania border on the north side of Route 40 and I-68 that they run east-west through western Maryland. So the stream that goes through the sanctuary is called Red Run, and it has considerable ecological significance. The headwaters of this stream are in an area known as Wolf Swamp, which lies to the south. Red Run, the stream of Red Run runs from south to north. It runs up into Pennsylvania. And this area, the stream, Wolf Swamp, the sanctuary at Red Run, are a relict of the last ice age. The area here, the geology of the area was formed about 15,000 years ago. So the bog that exists at Red Run is a peat bog that harbors plants and animals that are typically found much farther north. DNR biologists, if I say DNR, I'm assuming most people know that's Department of Natural Resources of Maryland. They're our friends and helpers when it comes to the sanctuaries. DNR biologists did a survey in this area in the 1980s and 1990s, and they identified 2 rare species on our sanctuary land. We didn't own it yet, but Shannon and Eleanor did. And these are the two-spotted skipper, shown in the photo at the top right, and a plant called white-fruited mountain rice, which is a state-threatened species, shown at the lower right. So there's a considerable ecological significance here, and that's representative of why Chan and Eleanor identified this as a place worthy of saving. Here's a map, a satellite map, showing the boundaries of the sanctuary outlined in yellow. The bog is here. It's this open area. All the rest of this is woods. We get into it by a private lane called Guthrie Lane on the west side. We have a little parking area just off the road. It's just a space, it's a roadside space that'll fit maybe 2 or 3 cars. And from there, there's a trail that goes down to the bog. There's another short trail up near the north end of the sanctuary. I'm also told, although I haven't done it myself, that you can get in from this other road, which is called Myersdale Road. You can park along the road and then walk in on an old trail up in this area. I haven't tried it myself, but these are photos of what the sanctuary looks like. This is the woodland, and this is the bog. And I have to tell you, after walking down this trail through the woods themselves are beautiful, but then you come out into this sunlit bog, and it is just spectacular. It's filled with native grasses and sedges and so on. And when I was there in the springtime, it was filled with a breeding colony of swamp sparrows. So it's really a very special place, really quite remarkable, not like anything else owned by MOS. The breeding birds, again, representative of western Maryland, including broad-winged hawk, blue-headed vireo shown in the photo here. I just mentioned the colony of swamp sparrows. I saw and heard more swamp sparrows there than I've ever seen in one place. So here's some final photos showing how beautiful the sanctuary is. Bed of ferns. Here's our trail. This has been photo enhanced to show you the route of the trail through the woods. Another photo of the bog is seen through the woodland. Really a very beautiful place. Deer hunting takes place not on the sanctuary. We don't allow hunting here, but the neighboring lands are privately owned, and there is a considerable amount of deer hunting here. So if you plan to visit during deer hunting season, I suggest you wear blaze orange to protect yourself. Be aware that there is deer hunting all around you, but the benefit of that is that we've got a pretty healthy understory in the sanctuary because the deer don't have a chance to attack it very much. So moving on, again, we're on our journey from west to east in the state of Maryland. We come to Frederick County, and this is for Bonnie Borsa, who's here with us tonight from Frederick County. We have one sanctuary in Frederick County called Seymour B. Cooper. It's located up in the north part of the county, north of the town of Thurmont, way north of the town of Frederick, which is here, up near the Pennsylvania line. It's near Catoctin Mountain Park, which is located here, and Camp David. So Seymour Cooper Sanctuary is one of our small ones. It's only 14 acres. I just mentioned it's located near Catoctin Mountain Park and Camp David. The Camp David proximity occasionally causes problems because when the President of the United States is in residence at Camp David, some of the local roads are closed. so it can be a little difficult to get to the sanctuary. This is another property that was transferred to MOS from the Nature Conservancy, this one in 1978. It was a gift to the Nature Conservancy by Mrs. Seymour Cooper. Her husband was quite an outdoorsman, and she donated this land as a memorial to him. It is entirely wooded and was previously logged, like most of the land in this area. Most of the forest in this area was cut for timber. There are no trails, but the understory is open, and it's really easy to walk throughout the sanctuary. So this satellite image shows the sanctuary. It's located here. It's a wedge-shaped parcel, and this is the brown versus green is an artifact of when the two satellite images were taken. But Seymour Cooper has neighbors that are small residential properties here on the right and here on the left. This is the public road that goes through. It's Eilers Valley Flint Road. And you park along the road. We do not have a parking lot here, but there's a wide shoulder at this end of the sanctuary where you can park. When you walk into the sanctuary, you're going to be walking up a slight hill. The sanctuary sits on the shoulder of Piney Mountain. So it's not steep. It's very easy walking, as you can see. This is a photo of the sanctuary sign, and here you're looking back into the woods. The breeding species of this area are, again, distinctive for Western Maryland. There's broad-winged hawk again, and shown in this photo this time. There are also some warblers that breed in the area, including redstart, ovenbird, worm-eating, and so on. Here's some final scenes showing you what it looks like at the sanctuary. I have to say, when visiting Seymour Cooper Sanctuary and comparing it to our other Western Maryland sanctuaries in Garrett County, there's an immediate difference that's apparent. The land here is a lot more rocky, and if I knew geology, which I don't, I'd be able to tell you why that is. But this is clearly the soils and the underlying rock formations are very different than what we have at our Garrett County sanctuaries. So it's a very different feeling. Also, this is a dry habitat. We don't have any streams at Seymour Cooper. So immediately feels different, but it's a very lovely place. Here's a photo of Gene, my husband, and some Frederick County Bird Club members birding along the road outside the sanctuary. Moving along again, you see I have picked up the pace because time is running on. We come to Prince George's County, where I live, and where MOS has one sanctuary called Piscataway. Piscataway is the name of the sanctuary. It's also the name of a major creek that flows into the Potomac River. It's the name of a national park located here along the banks of the Piscataway Creek and Potomac River, and the name comes from a Native American tribe that still occupies parts of this area. They were our forebears, and members of the tribe are still here with us today. So Piscataway Sanctuary, I just showed you, it's located in southwestern Prince George's County. This was donated to MOS by a developer in 2008. And I have to say, MOS, I think, has been remiss in not really using the sanctuary for anything much since the time MOS acquired it. The sanctuary is adjacent to a residential community that was built by the person who gave it to us. And it's also adjacent at the other side to a county park. It consists of 82 acres that are mostly wooded, deciduous woods. As you can see here, these photos were taken when the trees were out of leaf. And the sanctuary contains several streams that are in the Piscataway Creek and Potomac River watershed. This is the main stream. It's an unnamed stream that's a tributary of Piscataway Creek. So this is a satellite map that shows the sanctuary. The outline is here as I'm pointing to it. We have two trails in the sanctuary. One trail is accessed from the development that was built by the developer who gave us the land. Ironically, the name of the development is The Preserve at Piscataway. So the developer also built a little pavilion and a parking lot for us. So you come in through a cul-de-sac, park your car, and then walk down this trail shown in green, which runs down the stream valley of this unnamed stream that's a tributary of the Piscataway Creek. And then we have another trail that comes in from the south. This is the public park. It's a county park. They have one trail that comes in from Gardner Road, where there's a parking lot, and you walk in about a mile and then reach the MOS land. We hope, the Sanctuary Committee hopes to build a connector trail to make a loop here. The breeding birds of this area include some wetland-associated birds, including wood duck, red-shouldered hawk, which have a heavy diet of amphibians, and barred owl, which like wet woods. Ovenbird is also found here. The photo by Dominic Nucifora shows ovenbird. Come to think of it, Dominic Nucifora, I haven't mentioned him previously. He's the previous chair of the Sanctuary Committee, and I believe he's now a Carroll County Bird Club member. He lives up near Manchester. So just some scenes to show you what Piscataway looks like. It's a very lovely sanctuary. Here's our little pavilion, our trails through the woods and through the stream valley. Here's the stream valley again. And moving right along, still west to east, we come to Anne Arundel County, where the Litlist MOS Sanctuary is located, called Mandary's Creek. It's located on a little bay off of the Severn River, which is one of the major rivers of Anne Arundel County. And here's one thing I wanted to point out on this map. Here's the Chesapeake Bay. Here's the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. Here's the Severn. So you see how close Mandary's Creek is to the Chesapeake Bay. Just 8 acres of land is what MOS owns at Mandary's Creek. This sanctuary was donated to MOS by a former MOS president named Colonel William Bodenstein. He has passed away, so I should have said the late Colonel William Bodenstein. He and his wife gave this land to MOS in 1974. The land is right on this little bay off of the Severn River, and it is mostly marsh. At the time that MOS acquired the land, it was mostly a cattail marsh, but now it's filled in with Phragmites, unfortunately. But just like every other place along the Chesapeake Bay, it's been overrun with Phragmites. And there's a little strip of woods in the sanctuary along the public road by which you access the sanctuary. This is River Road, running north-south through Anne Arundel County. Even though it's tiny, this land is significant for MOS because it's our only marshland habitat on the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay. It doesn't have any trails. Most of it is marshland that you can't walk in, but there is easy walking along the road in the little woodland strip. So here's what it looks like from the road. You can see the woods are quite open and you just walk right in. Here is a tidal gut called Deep Ditch, which comes out at the southern boundary of the sanctuary and runs out to the little bay of the Severn River. Here's Dominic Nucifora standing on a log to get a better view of the Phragmites marsh that you can see. And you can see all the Phragmites here. There's very few cattails left. But while we were there in April of 2017, this lovely red-headed woodpecker flew in and landed on a snag right near us, and Dominic was able to get this great photo. If the snag had just been a little lower, Dominic and I could have reached out and touched this bird. It was that close. So we had a great view there. The breeding birds are quite spectacular. Wood duck, bald eagle, we've got some warblers that breed there. It provides good habitat. Some of the land across the road is undeveloped, and so we get some spillover of breeding birds from the undeveloped woods across the road. So that 8 acres holds more than you would think. Moving along now on our eastward journey, we've crossed the Chesapeake Bay Bridge from Mandary's Creek. We've come across the Bay Bridge, we've crossed Kent Island, and now we come to 3 sanctuaries that are on the middle portion of the eastern shore of Maryland. And the first one we're going to visit is Mill Creek. Mill Creek was actually the second sanctuary that MOS ever purchased. It's located in Talbot County. And the original purchase in 1964 was 108 acres, but MOS bought more acreage in 1965 and 1971. And then there was also a land donation by Mrs. Royce Spring in 1965. So Mill Creek now totals 156 acres, and the land is almost all wooded. It consists of mixed deciduous and pine woods in the valley of Mill Creek, which is a major tributary of the Chesapeake Bay. And this photo here in the middle shows Mill Creek itself. We have a covered pavilion with a fireplace and some picnic tables that's tucked away into the woods. It doesn't sit right by the road. You have to know where this is in order to find it. When MOS purchased Mill Creek Sanctuary in 1964, the excitement was palpable. This was just the second sanctuary that MOS purchased, so everybody throughout the society was very, very excited about this. And on the cover of Maryland Birdlife in June of 1964, someone drew a map of the sanctuary as it existed then and a little pictogram of the different birds and wildlife that can be found there. And they didn't forget to put in a birder with binoculars and some young people accompanying this birder. This is what the sanctuary looks like nowadays. This is a more modern, but still hand-drawn map of the sanctuary. The sanctuary has a north section. This is the part donated by Mrs. Royce Spring, and a large rectangular south section. This was the original purchase. These two sections are separated by Maryland Route 662, which comes down from Route 50. It comes down, whoops, I keep doing that, sorry. It comes down from the north and then makes an L-shaped curve, goes across Mill Creek, which is here, and then Route 662 continues eastward to come back out on Route 50. So Route 662 divides the sanctuary into a north and south portion. We do have an extensive trail system throughout the sanctuary, and it's quite a beautiful place to visit. One thing that's neat about Mill Creek Sanctuary is that we know more about it than any other sanctuary in the MOS portfolio. There was an extensive biological survey that was performed here starting in March of 1984. There was a team of 4 people led by Jan Reese. Paul Noel, Laurel Brown, and Jeff Effinger were the other team members. They visited every 2 weeks for 14 months, and their aim was to do what we would now call a BioBlitz. Their aim was to write down and take stock of every living thing that they could find. So after they finished, they produced an 82-page report that contains lists of everything they found: fungi, vascular plants, invertebrates, fish, amphibia, reptiles, mammals, and of course birds. There's also an extensive historical and cultural summary that talks about the place that the sanctuary occupies in the landscape and its history going back to colonial times, the geology, the soil types, the hydrology, and so on. It's really a complete top to bottom review of what the sanctuary is all about. And now that this is how many years later, quite a few years later, I can't do my math, almost 40 years later, we need to do it again because there have been a lot of changes in the sanctuary over time. In the old days, MOS, or not MOS, but Mill Creek Sanctuary was really known for its native wildflowers, including jack in the pulpit and native dogwood shown here. However, one thing that we didn't have in the old days was an extensive deer population, and now a lot of these native wildflowers have been wiped out because of overbrowsing by deer. I'll come back to the deer in a minute. Just like with the other sanctuaries, Rock Run, Carey Run, that were established before this time, Mill Creek quickly became a very active place, and nowadays it still is. The Talbot Bird Club takes good care of the sanctuary. They hold work days there at least every spring. Sometimes there's also a late summer work day. The work days, there aren't, other than the pavilion, here's the fireplace inside that pavilion. Other than that pavilion, there aren't any built structures. There are no houses at Mill Creek. So most of the work at Mill Creek consists of trail marking, boundary marking, and also bridge building. There are a lot of streams in Mill Creek, and there are bridges that require upkeep. So Talbot Bird Club hosts field trips, picnics, breakfast hikes, and youth programs there, as well as the work days. It's a great place to visit. But as I mentioned, we do have a deer problem there. And so we have a proactive deer management program. On an annual basis, the sanctuary is closed for deer management from September 1st through January 31st, which corresponds with deer season in Maryland. What we do is we have a contract with a local professional deer guide, and he brings in paying guests to hunt deer on the sanctuary. So MOS gets money from a hunting lease at the sanctuary. And in turn, our benefit is that we're starting to see this understory, which used to be devoid of plants because of the deer browsing, we're starting to see the plants come back in this understory. The deer management program has been in place for about 5 years now, and we're starting to see the benefits of it. But it means you can't visit because of the safety issues, with the deer hunting going on. So you can't visit during the fall. The breeding birds of Mill Creek Sanctuary, about 69 breeding species have been found in the first 2 atlases. I have not updated that number from the atlas that's in progress now. But barred owl is actually fairly easy to find in the sanctuary. One of the recent times I visited, we also found a small great blue heron rookery along the shores of Mill Creek. Catbird is kind of a common bird in the undergrowth there. And this is what it looks like. Again, a very pleasant place to visit, especially in the fall. We do have, shown here in the lower left, we do have a small parking lot at Mill Creek that is entered from a gate. The gate is not locked. It's closed but not locked. So anyone can come visit the sanctuary, just pull off the road. It's right on Route 662. Park here and then close the gate and then go on your merry way through the trail system. Again, we're moving along to our next sanctuary, also located in Talbot County. This is Marengo Woods Sanctuary, located on an area called the Miles River Neck. The Miles River is a tributary of the Eastern Bay and the Chesapeake Bay. Miles River wraps around this neck of land where Marengo Woods is located. So Marengo Woods consists of 49 acres of woodland. It's entirely wooded. Most of it is loblolly pine. The loblolly pines were intentionally planted as timber trees at one time, and there's some deciduous trees that are interspersed with the loblollies. I love all the sanctuaries. I'd be hard-pressed to say which one is my favorite. Each one is special, and each one has something unique to offer. But I have to say Marengo Woods has a special place in my heart, and I don't know why. But I feel really happy when I go there. And it might be because as soon as you walk in, the scent of pine just overtakes you. And it's just a very lovely place. It's surrounded by farm fields and timber woodlots. This area has been extensively logged over the years. And in fact, the way that MOS acquired this land is through a donation from a group of local landowners who got together in 1989. They bought the land and then donated it to MOS it was in memory of 2 of their friends who had recently passed away, but their specific intention was to preserve this tract of woods from ever being logged again. So it hasn't been logged since the probably 1960s, I think was the last time it was logged. And our plaque at the entrance to the sanctuary is located on this stone marker. The plaque lists the people who donated to the purchase of the sanctuary, and the 2 friends that it's in memory of are Margaret Shortle and Herbert Austin. There are no trails at Marengo Woods, but it's entirely walkable because it's level and there's an open understory. But I will mention there are some wet spots. There are vernal pools throughout the sanctuary. No flowing streams, but there are vernal pools that collect water from rainwater, and they remain, although they're called vernal, which means spring, these pools persist throughout the year, so it's wet much of the year, and so I do recommend boots if you go walking in there. The sanctuary is located at the corner of Gregory Road, which is here, and Marengo Road here, and we do have a small parking lot. It's a soft surface parking lot that was installed last year, courtesy of the Talbot Bird Club. Before this parking lot was installed, visiting the sanctuary was quite a chore because we didn't have any place to park. And there's ditches along the roadside and no shoulders, so it was really difficult to visit. But the Talbot Bird Club stepped up and built a parking lot for everyone to enjoy. So you can park here and then walk all around the sanctuary. And I recently did that. I walked the entire sanctuary, kind of following the borders, a couple of months ago. And it took me it's a small sanctuary. It didn't take very long, but I was moving slow because I was taking photos. So it probably took me about 2 hours. One thing that's really special about Marengo Woods is that even though it's relatively small, just about 49 acres, it sits in a much larger swath of preserved land. So here is a map that shows various parcels owned by different people in the area. Here's Marengo Woods, shown by the red star. And the orange blocks show land, including Marengo Woods, that's under a conservation easement with the Maryland Environmental Trust. These orange blocks of land are conserved and preserved in perpetuity. They will never be developed because of these conservation easements. So Marengo Woods is kind of the keystone of this swath of over 1,500 acres on the Miles River neck. There's another swath of 300 acres not far away on the other side of Leeds Creek. That includes the Nature Conservancy land shown in pink. This is called Rank Woods. There's another Nature Conservancy preserve over here called Third Haven Woods. And this larger block of land over here is more than 22 acres. That's also in private conservation. The yellow blocks, by the way, are Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation lands. It's a way to preserve farmland. But again, these lands are preserved in perpetuity. So the breeding birds of this area, again, Marengo Woods is small, but with all that preserved land, we've got some very nice breeding birds, including bald eagle, two owls, screech owl and great horned owl, red-headed woodpecker. Here's a black vulture that I snapped a photo of in the woodland, and brown-headed nuthatch also breeds there, so they're fun to see. Here's some more photos of what the sanctuary looks like. Here's one of the wetlands that I mentioned, a vernal pool. And this is the largest one. It's quite near the entrance corner, near the parking lot. And, you can't walk through it. You have to walk around it. And boots are advised. But the rest of the sanctuary has a lot of open ground, and it's quite easy to walk through. And I'm just looking to the left because my cat may be getting himself into trouble climbing on things. No, I think he's okay. So we have one more sanctuary on the upper part of the eastern shore, Myrtle Simon's Pilo Sanctuary, located over on the eastern side of Carroll County, very near the Delaware line. And here's a satellite image showing the outline of the sanctuary. This has a really irregular outline. It's this thing that to me looks like a dragon, a Chinese dragon. You know, those dragons they have in the parades at Chinese New Year. And the reason that this is an irregular outline is that the boundaries of the sanctuary follow the twistings and meanderings of Gravelly Branch, a stream that flows right through the center. Gravelly Branch is itself a tributary of the Choptank River, which lies over to the west. Here's a trail map, a hand-drawn trail map of the sanctuary. There's a prominent trail on the south side of the sanctuary. It starts at the public road here. Trail starts here at the sanctuary sign and then goes eastward south of Gravelly Branch, which is this line that goes through the middle of the sanctuary. There used to be a trail shown by the blue line along the northern boundary of the sanctuary, but I'll tell you that area has grown over so much that trail is no longer usable. I can't find it. I don't know where it is. So this sanctuary has an interesting history. Mrs. Pilo herself was a member of the Carroll County Bird Club, and she passed away in 1971. She lived on an acre of land in the town of Ridgely, and when she died, she left her house and that 1 acre to MOS. However, it was without restriction. MOS, could do anything they wanted with that property, and MOS had no need for 1 acre and a house in the middle of a town. So MOS sold the house and land and gained $34,000, which was used to purchase the sanctuary that we now call Pilo. Pilo consists of approximately 61 wooded acres, and like Mill Creek in the old days, Pilo is known for its native blooming plants. It's really a very beautiful sanctuary. The stream valley of Gravelly Branch runs right through the sanctuary. There used to be, back in colonial times, there was a mill along the stream, Gravelly Branch, and what used to be the mill pond still exists as a depression that has become a wetland. So that's a very nice habitat feature on this property. And here's a photo of the trail that goes through the south part of the sanctuary. This is Gravelly Branch itself. Prothonotary warbler breeds at the sanctuary and is fairly easy to find, as is summer tanager. There's about 80 breeding bird species in this area, according to the first two atlases. And here's some final scenes from Pilo. I mentioned the native wildflowers. Another thing I just quickly want to mention about the stream is that the stream is considered somewhat pristine. There are no pristine streams anymore in Maryland because of, our pollution problems, both from agriculture and industry. But Gravelly Branch at least is shaded, and so water temperatures in the stream are modified. And Gravelly Branch supports a population of breeding migratory fish that are being studied by the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. So that brings us to our last of the 10 sanctuaries, and I know that time is moving on, so I'm going to really talk fast. But our last sanctuary is Irish Grove, which contains this beautiful house pictured here. Irish Grove is located at the very bottom, the south end of the eastern shore. If it were any farther south, it would be in Virginia. It's located on the shores of Pocomoke Sound, and standing at this point of land at the south end of the sanctuary, you can literally see Virginia across the water. So that's where it is. And we consider, on the Sanctuary Committee, we consider Irish Grove to be the jewel in the crown of the MOS Sanctuary system. It consists now of over 2,300 acres, predominantly, mostly saltmarsh. There are also tidal streams, both fresh and saltwater ponds. The freshwater ponds are fed by rainwater, so they're pockets in the marsh that only receive rainwater. There's also a fair amount of loblolly pine woods. The trails, many of the trails are blanketed with loblolly pine needles. And there's about 45 acres that we keep in fields. This is high ground that are mown annually in order to keep habitat for field breeding birds. The house that I showed you in the first picture was built around 1890, and it was originally a farmhouse owned by the Green family. We also have a screened picnic area in this barn. Part of the barn was screened in at the end, and we use that as a gathering place. We need screens because one thing that Irish Grove is famous for is biting insects. We have every kind known to man and probably some unknown to man, but there's everything. There's mosquitoes, there's greenhead flies, there's horse flies, all sorts of things. Deer flies, excuse me. All sorts of bugs are there, and you need to be in the screened area from April through November. It's a long bug season. We also have other infrastructure, including storage sheds, observation platforms such as this one, a large number of trails, boardwalks, and bridges. So this place requires a lot of upkeep. Here's some overhead photos that give you an idea of how big Irish Grove is. It's huge. This is the tax map for the area that shows that the little dots are the different centers of the different parcels that make up Irish Grove. We have 17 parcels in this sanctuary, and as you can see, they're almost all very large. The surrounding area has some normal-sized parcels of residential and farmland, but Irish Grove is just huge. This is East Creek, which flows up through the middle of the sanctuary, and this is Pocomoke Sound down here. And you can see some of the woodlots here in these overhead photos, as well as extensive marsh. And this is a view looking down on the house and its buildings. So Irish Grove was not acquired all at one time. It was the third sanctuary purchased by MOS. The original purchase was in 1968 and consisted of over 1,400 acres that cost $80,000. Just like with Carey Run, MOS paid half of this in cash and then mortgaged the other half and paid it off within 3 years. Again, they were enthusiastic fundraisers back then. There was additional acreage that was purchased by MOS in 1971, 2008, and 2017, and a significant gift of 148 acres was donated to MOS by the Eastern Shore Land Trust in 1992. Even more exciting, in 2019, a pair of local landowners gave MOS a gift of 715 acres. that consists almost entirely of Saltmarsh down at Rumbly Point, south of the house. So that's right on Pocomoke Sound. It's really very productive bird habitat, just beautiful. So we now have over 2,300 acres at Irish Grove. And this is what it looks like. It's just breathtakingly beautiful everywhere you look. Gene, my husband, will tell you that it's really annoying to walk any of the trails with me because every time I turn a corner, I have to stop and take photos. It's just so beautiful. This is one of the ponds, the freshwater ponds at Irish Grove. Here's one of the boardwalks that leads to an observation deck, this one named for Jim Stas. Here's a little rough green snake that Sue Riccardi and I found on a walk last fall. Here's some of the sanctuary volunteers, Dominic Nucifora, Paul Bystrak. Paul has been volunteering at Irish Grove since MOS first bought it back in the 1960s. He was taken there as a teenager as part of a team led by Chan Robbins, and Paul and his brother Danny helped to lay out the trail system at Irish Grove. So Paul knows this sanctuary better than anyone still alive. And this is Dottie Mumford, who was the sanctuary chair for many years. What they are doing is installing a sign that marks one of our trails named after Dottie. And as I said, the trails are quite nice. This one blanketed with loblolly pine needles. Here's a map of the trail system. Here's the house. This is the public road called Rumbly Point Road, which runs past the house and comes out on the Pocomoke Sound all the way down at Rumbly Point, which is about 1.5 miles away from the house. But from the house, there's a trail system that spreads out. The white trails can be driven in a vehicle, a high clearance vehicle, probably for most of the year. And the pink or purple trails can be walked on foot, and boots may be needed for some of these. Some of them can get a little bit wet, but there's a nice trail system. You can spend, several days wandering the trails here. I wanted to mention something about habitat change. We all know about climate change and sea level rise, and we're seeing that in action at Irish Grove. We're experiencing something known as marsh migration, which is associated with sea level rise. Basically, what's happening is that areas that used to be called low marsh are replacing what used to be high marsh. And the difference is low marsh is flooded on every change of tides. On every high tide, two tides a day, low marsh will be flooded. Whereas high marsh only gets flooded on the very high tides that are associated with the new moon and the full moon. So, just a couple times every month, the high marsh will be flooded. But high marsh is turning into low marsh that's almost constantly flooded because of sea level rise. And we can see that happening on the north end of the sanctuary, where there used to be high marsh that's becoming low marsh. We used to have foot trails that enabled you to walk either from the house at Irish Grove or from the public road through this marsh over to this point of land, where there used to be another house located called the North House. That house is in ruins today. There's nothing left of it, so there's really no reason to go there. But you couldn't get there by walking if you wanted to, because there's too much water in the marsh here. And these photos show you how wet this marsh is now, and it used to be walkable. The other thing that you can see here is these dead trees. That's a phenomenon known as a ghost forest. These trees are deciduous trees that are not used to having their feet in wet ground, and they don't do well in wet ground, so they're dying off. These ghost forests are an indicator of this marsh migration that's happening due to sea level rise. So we're seeing this change right in action at Irish Grove, and I've been going there since the 1990s, so 30 years. I've seen it happen in those 30 years. It's really very remarkable how the habitat has changed. Irish Grove, like our other sanctuaries, is a busy place. The house is available for overnight stays by MOS members. There's also camping available on the lawn. There are annual work weekends held in both the spring and fall. The next one is coming up, November 4th to the 6th. If you'd care to participate, please do volunteer. We can always use an extra hand. Here's a group of work weekend volunteers enjoying a potluck meal in the screen picnic enclosure. There are chapter field trips that are held there. Scientific research is conducted there. It's the headquarters for the Chrisfield Christmas bird count. We have provided lodging for DNR biologists as well as other biologists coming to study the birds at Irish Grove. Gladys Cole, a late MOS member, used to conduct bird banding there. We held camps for Maryland science teachers, and lots of groups have visited. But these are all photos from work days, including this one, which was just taken last fall, a year ago. So still a busy place, and we need help to take care of this very large property. And now my cat has come to visit me on the table where I'm talking, so hopefully he won't knock over my water. Hey, Rudy, get on down. These are some views of what the interior of the house looks like. And you can see it's not fancy. I mean, after all, it was built in the 1890s, so pretty basic, but quite comfortable for a stay. These are some of the special birds that exist at Irish Grove. In fact, over 256 species have been identified there. And, I'm not going to narrate because I'm trying to move fast through these remaining slides right now. The Breeding Bird Atlas is a challenge at Irish Grove because Irish Grove is so large, it covers 4 Breeding Bird Atlas blocks. Over 80 breeding bird species have been identified there. Black rail used to breed there, but no longer does. Black rail is in decline throughout the East Coast. But we still have clapper rails and Virginia rails and willets and brown-headed nuthatches and lots of other very special birds. Some final parting scenes that display the beauty of Irish Grove. These were taken by Paul Bystrack. So we've made our journey from west to east across the state, visiting all the MOS sanctuaries. And I do have to get up to grab my cat for a minute, so please excuse me. I'm going to keep talking, though, as I walk away for a minute. Okay, the cat is now under control. I do have a few more slides, but I'm just going to jump through these very quickly. One of the things I wanted to emphasize is that all of our sanctuaries are important for biodiversity conservation. And you can look at this in a number of ways. Our Maryland DNR provides a number of indicators of conservation value of different lands. And if we look at just one parameter, the ability to support biodiversity, we see that the biodiversity potential index runs on a scale of 0 to 100. We see that most of our sanctuaries score very high on this measure. Ironically, one of the lowest is Carey Run, and that's because of its fields. The fields offer additional diversity for bird life, but they don't get a high ranking from DNR because DNR bases its measurements on agricultural fields of cropland and not the kind of fields that we're maintaining at Carey Run. So we can work with them on that to get a better definition, I think, of field habitat. But I just wanted to emphasize the take-home message is all of the sanctuary lands are important for conservation of biodiversity. And remember, it's not just about birds. Now, I'm not going to go through these slides, but we do monitor data on other species, including the herp atlas data. And this slide has the different sanctuaries in columns and toads and frogs in the rows. Frogs and toads are everywhere in the sanctuaries. This is a take-home message from this one. Salamanders are also distributed throughout the sanctuaries, lizards and turtles, and snakes. Again, the point of these slides is to emphasize that the sanctuaries support wildlife other than birds. There's also good herps in the sanctuaries. And as I've mentioned a couple times, we do support research at the sanctuaries. I had already mentioned the BioBlitz that we conducted at Carey Run with the Maryland Entomological Society. A number of people are conducting nocturnal insect surveys. These are happening at Carey Run, at the Robbins Sanctuary, Mill Creek, and Irish Grove. And the people doing these are Sue Muller, Dave Webb, and Jim Brighton. Jim is one of the principals of the Maryland Biodiversity Project. Sam Droege, the bee researcher from Patuxent Wildlife Research Center, is conducting ongoing native bee surveys at Mill Creek Sanctuary. I already mentioned the water research and the fish sampling that's being done by the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center at Pilo Sanctuary. We've got a barn owl nest project at Irish Grove that's being conducted by DNR and MOS. And the bluebird nest box monitoring at Carey Run is our longest running project. It started in the 1960s and is still ongoing. So we contribute to a lot of scientific knowledge by maintaining the sanctuaries. I'm going to skip this slide and just say we do need volunteers. The easiest thing you can do to help us out at the sanctuaries is just to visit. And when you're there, submit an eBird report or an iNaturalist report. The grounds are open daily to the public. You don't need a reservation to visit the grounds. You do need a reservation to stay in the house at Carey Run or Irish Grove. They're the only two that have overnight accommodations. You could also submit photographs of habitat, and photographs tell, 1,000 stories. So the easiest way to submit these is to put them as a public contributor to Google Maps. Every sanctuary has a place point on Google Maps, and you can upload your photos right there. Atlasing at the sanctuaries would be a great help. If you could help the Sanctuary Committee with fundraising or grant writing, that would be great. Come out to the work days and help us with trail building and house maintenance. If you have native plants that you don't need at your home, you could help us by donating them to be planted at the sanctuaries, and better yet, come plant them yourself. And we also accept donations to the MOS Sanctuary Fund. If you want to get involved in any of these, please contact the Sanctuary Chair, who is Jeremy Castle. He is a member of my bird club, Patuxent Bird Club. And as I mentioned earlier, I've put Jeremy's contact information in the chat, and I'll send it around to Michelle on a handout after this talk. For more information, this is the slide I mentioned. If you in the room, somebody has a cell phone and you want to take a picture of this would be a good time, because it has the references for where to find MOS Sanctuary information on the MOS website, as well as in the Birders Guide. And a really handy thing we have is a one-page fact sheet and state map that can be downloaded from the MOS website. So I'm going to close there because it's getting late. So thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it. And I'm going to stop my screen share now and take questions. And I'm also stopping the